You're probably staring at a spreadsheet of specs, reading a dozen reviews, and thinking, do I really need an 8-bay rack mount NAS? Or am I just adding another expensive piece of hardware I'll barely use? That hesitation is real. Spending a few $100s on a chassis that sits idle or forces you into a complicated setup is a nightmare. And if you end up with a unit that doesn't fit your rack, doesn't play nice with the drives you already own, or ends up overheating because you missed a hidden limitation, that money is gone. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's walk through why the 212 main RS1221RP might be the right fit for a very specific set of needs, and why it could be a waste of time for others. First, picture the environment you're planning to drop this into. Most people buying an 8-bay NAS are either running a small to medium business, maintaining a home media library that needs redundancy, or building a lab where they want to spin multiple virtual machines off a single storage pool. In those scenarios, the value comes from the ability to hot swap drives, to stack a RAID array that protects against a single drive failure, and to mount the whole thing cleanly in a standard 19-inch rack without a million cables dangling. If you're a hobbyist who only needs a couple of terabytes for personal backups, you'll probably find the RS1221RP overkill. The price per bay is higher than a simple desktop enclosure, and you'll be paying for features you never use, like the dedicated front panel drive bays that slide out with a single click. In that case, you might be better off with a 2 or 4 bay NAS that plugs directly into your router. So who should actually consider this box? The sweet spot is someone who already has a rack or is planning a rack in the near future, and who already owns or plans to buy multiple hard drives for a RAID 5 or RAID 6 configuration. If you run a small office that needs a shared folder for dozens of users, the ability to add 8 drives means you can start with 4 4TB drives for a 12 TB usable space in RAID 5, and later expand to 8 drives without recabling the whole system. The hot swap capability is a real time saver. Replace a failing drive while the unit stays online, and the RAID controller rebuilds in the background. From a practical standpoint, the RS1221RP shines in 3 areas that matter after the purchase. First, the rack mount design is truly 19-inch compatible. You slide the chassis into your rack and bolt it down with the provided rails, no need for custom brackets. The front panel has a clear LCD status readout that tells you which bays are active, which are rebuilding, and whether any drive has tripped an alarm. That visual feedback is more useful than a web UI that you have to open on a laptop every time you want to verify health. Second, the drive bays themselves are truly hot swap. The sliding trays lock into place with a soft click and release with a lever, no need to open a side panel or wrestle with screws. In a real-world outage, that means you can grab a replacement drive from a spare drawer, pop it in, and let the NAS handle the rebuild. I've seen small businesses lose a whole day because their NAS required a full power down to swap a drive. The RS1221RP avoids that pitfall entirely. Third, the power supply is a separate, redundant unit that can be swapped without interrupting the rest of the system. That's a detail most people skim over, but in a server room where uptime is a KPI, having a hot replaceable PSU is a genuine advantage. You can keep the NAS running while you replace a faulty power brick, and the unit will automatically shift to the backup supply. Now let's talk about the hidden trade-offs. The first thing that trips up some users is the lack of built-in network aggregation. The unit ships with a single gigabit Ethernet port. If you're planning on serving multiple 4K video streams or running a heavy VM workload, a single 1 GB E-link can become a bottleneck. You'll need to add a separate network card or a switch that supports link aggregation, which is an extra cost and a bit of configuration work. Another practical downside is the cooling design. 8 drives generate a decent amount of heat, and the RS1221RP relies on 3 front-mounted fans that run continuously. In a tightly packed rack, those fans can contribute to overall room temperature, and they're not the quietest. If you're deploying this in a home office or a small studio where noise matters, you may notice a low hum that's audible from across the room. It's not a malfunction, just a side effect of keeping 8 spinning disks at safe temperatures. The management software is functional but not the most polished you'll find. It provides basic RAID configuration, health monitoring, and file sharing, but the web interface can feel a bit dated, and some users report that firmware updates occasionally require a manual reboot of the whole unit. That's not a deal breaker.